The typical sports media podcast talks about the biz. You have somebody on for an interview and you run through the X's and O's of what someone does. But what you do is not everything in terms of who you are. There is more to that. And yes, it can be hard when you live in the world of sports media and our identity is attached seemingly to our work. I know that a lot of you out there are like that as well. But in this setting, on the Honest Something podcast, I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio Tennis Channel and Call Different Sports for other outlets. We're going to welcome on Dan Gale, who is with Leona, and he is a power player in the world of college athletics, where he is brokering millions of dollars of deals in media rights, multimedia rights, apparel rights. And sure, his resume is stacked, but there's so much more to his life, and that is where we go in this conversation. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe. Here's my chat with Dan. Here he is, Dan Gale, joining me. I'm Bryan Fenley, and we're going to look at his life. We're going to look at his story. And when we talk about, Dan, your life is behind you in a very organized way. How do you document your story based upon what I'm seeing behind you and all the sports memorabilia?
Well, Brian, first and foremost, thanks for having me. And if I had a voice like yours, brother, I would be on ESPN doing
Oh,
everything you're
stop
doing,
it.
man. I'm going to have you record my old voicemail when we're done. So, but first, like I said, thank you. And yeah, it's funny, during COVID, had the opportunity to kind of reflect a little bit. I know a lot of people had that, and you know, as a guy who lives on the road 150 to 180 nights a year, COVID was good for some things where I was able to be more around my kids, but I also got bored and
Yeah.
had the opportunity really of going through and kind of putting the history together of hey, like the top, they're all the schools I worked with when I was at CBS. I've got my college football helmet, which I got in trouble for because I wasn't supposed to have that, but it looks good up there. National championship poster, and then the work we've done with Alabama. It's even filled up more and more over the last few years, and the most important thing really is like Leona, who Leona is, our company, the background of it, credentials of places we've been over the last 5 years. It's
Wow.
been really, really, or 8 years now. Holy cow! It was fun to really look back and kind of see some of that, of diving through it and being able to tell that story. So I do thank you for having me today because I'm just a small kid from Jersey who has been blessed to work in sports, and I still don't think my parents or family have any idea of what I do. They just know I go to sporting events for a living.
So you say they don't know what you do. What have those conversations been like, especially when you were beginning this journey of yours, where you tried to tell them and it wasn't computing with them?
It's funny. So my father's a retired prison guard. My mother was a school guidance counselor. So we had both sides of the spectrum growing up. My grandfather ran a party boat, which is actually where Leona came from. He worked in the mill and he ran a fishing charter in the summer. He had the Leona, and then he had the Leona 2 out of good old Matt's Landing in Heislerville, New Jersey, population of 400 people. So really small. That the only sports my family really knew were listening to the Phillies on the radio and going to the Millville high school football games. And everybody knows Millville now because of Mike Trout. And, I take credit for teaching him everything he knows, even though he was like 7 when I was there. But as we looked at it, we came from a really small rural area. And sports, it was the football coach. I mean, Tony Serace, Bobby Serace is coach at Princeton. Tony was our athletic director, football coach. That was the big thing. So it's funny, when I ended up going to East Stroudsburg, and I was recruited by some, Ivy League schools, Patriot League schools for track. I wanted to be a football guy, wanted to play football. I got to East Stroudsburg, realized I was a bad football player. I probably should have just went to school for track. But I love the game, and I've got great friends through it. Explaining that to my parents back then, I wanted to be a coach. Okay, that was easy. That's what we had solved. Well, then I got into the business side, and I got hurt my senior year, so I started working for the athletic director. And I'm going, I didn't even understand it. I didn't know there was a business side to it. I thought sports kind of just happened. So, my last 2 years, or 1 year of school and then another year there of working, was working for the athletic director. And that's when my parents were like, okay, so you're doing what? Like, you're not coaching, you're setting things up. So then I leave and go down to North Carolina and start working for Learfield, seeing the external side while getting a master's degree. And that's where it kind of got understanding, like, okay, what are you going to school for? All right, I want to be an athletic director. All right, they could understand that, but knew the high school side. Well, then it just kind of started evolving of, working through on the multimedia rights side, trying to explain multimedia rights to them of how it works in the collegiate side where you're selling off your rights because you're not set up that way. And it's just really like my life. And I thank God for the path that have come, some through track and field, some through other options. But it really just kept a kid of a town of 400 kept seeing more and more opportunities, more and more things that were out there. And then it's funny now with Leona, we're in a niche area. I found one of those niche areas. And I think that's what, when I go down to the Easter egg hunt, we're going to go up and see some family this weekend, or other things, explaining it to them of, hey, we help universities maximize their third party deals by being a vendor centric company where we help them because we've all lived it. I've got Lindsay Ross on our team. I've got Sean Sullivan, people that have lived the other side. That's where we've been different. And trying to explain that to them, I really just say, and it's funny. I've got a 4-year-old going on 40. I mean, she runs the show. Well, last night I asked her, hey, what do you think Daddy does? She goes, you make people money. And I'm like, well, yeah, we do, but there's a lot more to it in the process. So I was explaining to her, hey, yeah, we help people maximize their deal. I'm trying to explain it to a 4-year-old. And this is what I've learned. If I can't explain it to a 4-year-old, I'm probably not explaining it right to my family. So maybe that's on me a little bit.
Well, it sounds like your 4-year-old might know more about what you do than your parents, right? I mean, that could be something, and
Well,
that's
she
okay.
knows. She knows. It's funny. My family's been blessed. I mean, like I said, I travel a lot, and we've tried to take. My wife would go with me before we had kids. Now we have 2 great kids. A 4.5-year-old. Should make sure you got to say the half. 4.5 and a just turned 3-year-old, and they've gotten to travels. They've gone to Arizona. They've gone to Hawaii. Before the pandemic, my daughter went, and I believe this should be in the Guinness World Record. She was at every Commander in Chief game. She was at Air Force, Army, Army, Navy, Navy, Air Force. She was at all 3 with a credential before her 6-month birthday. So I don't know that anybody else has ever done that, like to go to all 3 in the same year. She went to the Rose Bowl that year. She was at the Cotton Bowl that year. So she was quite the traveler. And then COVID hit, so I felt bad for my son. Now they're starting to go a little bit, and we live 7 minutes from the Naval Academy. But last year we went up to Army, took them up, and Mike Buddy, who's become a dear friend that we've worked with, hosted us and was able to get to show my kids, hey, yeah, not only the interaction, but also there's a lot of perks to it. Getting the tour. I think my wife liked the Army tour more than anybody, but yeah, she's starting to see it. But the funny part is, I joke, they see the perks. They're not flying to Manhattan, Kansas on Tuesday night and then flipping on a flight and flying down to Lubbock, Texas. So like it's and you understand this. You're on the road. You're doing the events. People are like, hey, you get to go to all these events. It's tough. Like at times, yeah, it's great, and I forget about that at times. You forget that you're blessed to get to go to those. You don't have to, and that's where it's great when you get to see the 4-year-old eyes, like going to Disney or even my father. I take him to a game a year, and it helps re-energize me. Of hey, I've been to Notre Dame. We're going to go down to Clemson next year. We take him to a game. You get that opportunity where, for me, it's we're working. Talk to the AD, talk to the the rights holder, see what's going on, and then I'll leave by halftime most of the time. But when you take them, it re-energizes. It gets you excited, and I think that's the part with, like I said, with having kids now, them getting to see it in a different light. So we've been blessed, and I try to take them to things that I can. But my daughter will tell you, Daddy goes to Hawaii and Arizona. That'll come up multiple times.
She doesn't know what you do there, but you are going to some pretty awesome destinations, clearly. And Dan Gale is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. What do you think your kids like most about you?
Mm. It's tough. As a father, my dad was tough. My dad was a really tough guy. I mentioned prison guard. He also coached football, growing up through. And And there was a time that, he was very, very hard on me, but in a good way. And I remember he would always look at it, and it's an expectation thing. And I think that's where I want my kids to see that too. And maybe I don't want to be as hard as my old man, but I do want, like, we have rules. We have certain things we went through with our kids, and they know. I think daddy wants them to be the best that they can be in whatever that is. And that's where, like, my daughter, and I literally was at the Final Four, and I'm showing more videos of my daughter swimming. I was that parent. My daughter doing butterfly at 4. She's doing backstroke. I'm joking with ADs and going, all right, when are the letters coming in? Like, so daddy's going to help them be in the best position that they can succeed. But I ask my kids every day, 3 things. Hey, what did you do at school for fun? What did you learn? And what did you try and fail at? Like, and that's where I think part of my father would always ask me one question. Hey, what did you learn? Well, that would get me sometimes, because, like, I remember in wrestling my junior year of high school, he goes, "What'd you learn?" I said, "Dad, I learned I'm terrible at wrestling, and I probably should never do this again." And thank God, that's when I picked up javelin, and everything worked out well. But for me, I want my kids to try things and fail. Falling on the monkey bars. I want them. Like, we went to the park, and luckily this week I don't have any travel, which is really nice. So I took an hour and went to the park with them, and it's like, okay, go on the monkey bars. And my daughter's going, I might fall. I'm like, okay, fall. Falling is okay. Failing's all right. That's what we're trying to instill in our kids, because you learn more from your failures than you do, like you said, these successes and stuff up here. They're a culmination of so many failures, and that's through the business of other things. I mean, spent time with CBS. I worked with some other companies after that from a vendor perspective, and some were great, some were failures, and I think that's what helped find that path, and that's really what I want from them. So I think if I were to die tomorrow, and hope to God that doesn't happen, that's what I'd want them to remember, is that daddy wanted you to be in the best position, but I also wanted you to fail and try.
That's so well said. And you mentioned your own father and how he was hard on you. How did you get to a point, Dan, where you realized that you didn't have to be exactly the way your father wanted you to be, and you had the awareness to say, while I appreciate that, here's how I'm going to do it differently? Because oftentimes we don't even realize how much we are a reflection of our parents, but you had this awareness to say, okay, I see that for what it is, and there is good there, but I want to go this way. To have that awareness is something special. How were you able to get to that point?
And I want to be clear. My father is the greatest thing that ever happened to me, and my mother and my family. I mean, I tell you, that town of 400 people, I was related to. I had 24 cousins, so it was like, it was a
Wow.
bigger family too. Yeah, and my grandparents lived up the street. I thank God every day for that, where I came from. In Heislerville, New Jersey, you couldn't pick it out off of a map. No stoplights. Literally had one general store that went belly up. And it was a blessing to be where I was from. But what I also got to do is, growing up in that, a village raises a kid, and that's the part. Like, my village right now is a lot bigger nationally, from people like that are helping raise my kid. It's an AD that sees them when we're traveling, or locally friends that work around. I had a small circle, and I think for me, it kept seeing more and more. And sports is really what helped me. Sports. If you ask me, I mean, I was a freak on sports knowledge, following Super Bowls when I was a kid. Like, that's it. I'm probably not as big of a fan now because it's a business, but back then it was a gateway out. Like, oh, there's more to the world, and only sport that we saw was high school sports. And then once there was people that kind of got out, and went on to college. And I remember a guy named Greg McGraw, who I was a kid watching him at high school. He went to Nebraska as a walk-on, played on those national championship teams in the early 90s while I was in high school. And it was like, wow, that's awesome. There's something more. And the thing for me, football was, I played it from birth, essentially. I mean, they got pictures of me going through. What changed a lot for me was track and field. My dad was a high jumper. My sister, who's younger, actually was a state champion pole vaulter, went to college on a scholarship. But for me, javelin was the first thing my dad got to be a father on. Like football, even playing through at high school, he was still coaching. And it was getting to be that father and him coming to watch. That was really cool for me. And then javelin opened up opportunities where, I mean, I'm going to junior nationals. And because I was so young, I was also 16 as a senior in high school. You know, I was
Oh,
president of the
wow.
class, captain of the football team. So my freshman year in college, I was still competing against high school kids on the national level. That's really, for me, really when that shift happened of, and I joke academically, you know, could have went to other places. You know, East Stroudsburg was great as a teaching institution. That's what I thought I was going to do. But when I was looking at other places, I wouldn't have succeeded at North Carolina, at a bigger institution out of the gate. I needed that other step because it was just part of life, of seeing it. And it's why I have so much love for ESU, is built some great friendships there. But it opened my eyes to, hey, there's more out there. There's more that I could do. And I think for me, that was that revelation of like, my father stayed, he helped, you know, my grandparents, you know, our family stayed close. And that was a conscious decision. And I thank him for that. Whereas with us and our family, it was a little different. He had me very young, and my mom had me. They were very young. They were early 20s, which is great now. You know, he can still play golf. He can do things, and my mom's, you know, running around like crazy. We're blessed to that, but it was different. So for me, you know, being able to go then work at Carolina, go work at Air Force, you know, working in so many different places in my 20s and early 30s before being blessed meeting my amazing wife. When I moved up here to the Baltimore area, I had that chance to learn and figure things out. And then, you know, I didn't call my dad a lot when I was, you know, 16, 17, 18, asked for advice. Then it was, you know, hey, now getting that advice and seeing, and I think what it ultimately realized was it's just like starting a business. You don't have all the answers. I mean, I talked to business, like I thought my father and mother had every answer in
Yeah.
the world. And I think as I've gotten older, I realized I mean, my wife and I were looking at each other last night about one thing with our kids being like, I don't know, like, do we do that? Do we not? Like, but you come off with that. All right, hey, we're unified front. We're working together as a family to grow. And I think it's been more replicating a lot of what my parents did, but just having seen so much more now. They grew up and lived in that small
Yeah.
area that didn't understand of, you know, uh, how what other opportunities may be out there. And I think that's really, for me, what I want to be able to show is for our kids, there are so much opportunity. My parents always said you could be whatever you wanted. Well, for me, it was the fixed mindset. I didn't know what else was out there because I hadn't seen it.
Mm. How has your wife also shown you what's out there that you didn't know was out there?
You know, my wife Stephanie, you know, and I hate to say my wife, my partner. She's been, I mean, an amazing person. She has a great story in her own right. You know, she was an athlete, went to Ashland, ran for 3 years at Division II power of Ashland. You know, national champion level. Ended up leaving school after her junior year. Academically, was going to have to sit out, so she left. Went and found her own path too. Moved to Baltimore with her sister. Worked in the bar industry. Started working then for an IT company, but had a glass ceiling that because she didn't have a degree. Well, I'm a pusher, and you may have already learned that through here. My wife's you know, she's somebody who just has so much talent that, you know, sometimes didn't push herself, and was scared of, I think, failing sometimes. And I credit my parents of like, failing's not a bad thing. We talked about that with our kids. So my wife at 35 went back to college. When we were living, I was working for Vivid Seats before starting Leona. She went back to college, and we were joking about it. I said, "Hey, you know, you still have eligibility." And she's like, "Yeah, I'm 35. Ha ha ha." Well, we had just run a 5 mile race together, and I hate running. I'm going to say that for everybody. I was a thrower. Running was punishment in football. But got into this 5 mile race. Was doing it to get in shape. I'm the competitive guy. I looked over to her in the fourth mile and said, "Let's race." She runs like a 6 minute last mile, and I'm going, "What the what?" Like, I mean, we had a couple beers the night before. Like, where is this coming from? So we joked. I said, "Hey, you know, you still have eligibility." Well, sure enough, when we moved to Chicago, we started looking at some NAIA schools for her that she can finish her degree. She only needs 1 year left. And then she had said that she had always wanted to go into fundraising for Leukemia Society. She had won the Woman of the Year as a volunteer and had wanted to do it. And I said, well, do it. Like, why not? Let's go. Let's move to Chicago. We were not even engaged yet, but I knew it was part of the plan. I was like, get engaged, quit your job, go back to school. She then, and it was funny because with Dave Benedict, grandson of what they did at UConn, I was actually down at an Auburn football game on the sideline with DB, and I get a phone call, and I'm looking at it, and it's from Chicago, and I'm going, oh my gosh, everything okay? It's Governor State University calling to offer Steph a scholarship because I had put my cell phone on there instead of hers, and I'm looking like for Ashton Kutcher and Punked at that time, and DB looks at me, he's like, what's going on? I was like, I think my wife just got a scholarship to run cross country at an NAIA school. So I call her, and sure enough, they offer her this scholarship. And so she has to go back in January and do one semester, and then she can run in the fall. Well, it's perfect. Well, the issue is January of 2016, this is when decide to part ways with Vivid and decide to go start Leona. So now we've got to move back. Mind you, the school's in Chicago. We move back. Our house is rented out at the time, and you can't even make this up. We moved back into my high school bedroom, me and her, as we're getting married, and I'm coaching her, convinced the coach to let her do this because the fall semester will all be online, and she's training, and it's right as our wedding, and we both look in the best shape of our life. We joked, like, you got to do that for your wedding pictures because they're always going to be up. But so she starts training and competes for a school in Chicago. You know, our place, our house rented out. We're back in July. We just got married. Starting out Leona, doing a lot of things, figuring it out. Well, she flies in for meets. So it's like Fast Times at Ridgemont High. She literally flew in for the meets the night before, competed, came back. Well, she qualified for nationals. So she qualifies for nationals at 35 years old, and then gets her dream job of working for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society in Baltimore. So for me, it was so awesome to be on that journey with her. Now, there's days I think she may tell you she hated me because I put on the coach hat finally, and I was that pusher. I mean, I feel bad for her because she would have had a real coach. She probably would have broke 17 minutes in the 5Ks, but she was running 18s, got her to a point. I'm going, this is insane. Like I wish we could have done more, but yeah, it was great. She got to go to nationals and go through it, and then work with Leukemia Lymphoma Society. And now, it was when she was pregnant with our second, with our child, with Danny, the third, our son DG3. Talked about it, and she's stayed home, and she's taken a conscious decision to help be there so I can be on the road more and be able to come back. And she's the CEO of the household. I mean, she's handling all that and still staying involved on boards, and she's doing a great job on helping out on the Mark Butler Foundation board and other things. But she can handle things in a different way, and her perspective is different than mine. But she came from a blue collar family as well. That's what we both value, and I don't know there's many people in the world that we leave in Vivid, no idea what's going to happen. All right, let's pack everything in a U-Haul while you're in school, put it in storage, and go live in my high school bedroom until our other house comes up while we're trying to figure this out. And that's 7-8 years ago. It seems like it was yesterday, and it seems like it was 100 years ago at the same time.
What kind of self-confidence and will, Dan, does it have to leave behind some of the certainties of your life, like you said, and start this new project with Leona anew? A lot of question marks. You didn't know where it was going. What does it take internally to have this belief that this is going to work out? You might not see it right now. It might not become what it is now, but this is what you wanted to do, and you knew it was going to work out. Even when you were getting started, you weren't sure how it all was going to come together.
It's back to the raising of the family. It takes a good team and a great partner. I mean, there's no way I would have been able to do this without my wife. She was the one kind of pushing and knew I was, miserable and working on the other vendor side because I knew this is a relationship industry, and doing it the right way. It's not, hey, go meet with somebody. Here's the contract. Okay, it may take a little bit of time, And we all know higher ed's a different world, and you've worked in it, I've worked in it. But understanding that, and it built some great relationships. And she was a backbone of that. Of like, all right, we'll figure, like, what's the worst that could happen? What's the worst? And look, playing that kind of game of, all right, all right, well, you get a job somewhere at first. Well, the difference was, once I changed that mindset from what was the worst that could happen to say, okay, what's the best that could happen? And I had somebody else that was, when I was training for the trials in javelin, a cricket bowler came to train with us with how we threw. And he said, Dan, you're always talking about your fallback plan. I have no fallback plan, is what he told me. And that first year, I was always like, all right, hey, well, I could always do this, could always do that. And I hear that from so many entrepreneurs that it's always, oh, well, I could do this, could it burn the boats? And that's a scary thing. And I told this to a friend of mine in the consulting world. He was looking, oh, someone might buy me this. And I said, look, you're either going to do it or you're not. And you got to burn the boats, and you just got to go. And if you keep looking back in your rearview mirror, I might do this, I might do that, you're never going to be what you could be. And a lot of that was, it's tough and it's scary. I mean, we did 6-month check-ins, my wife and I. And I remember there was a point in that 18 months in, I'm going, honey, I have no idea where the next 6 months are going to come from. Do I need to, go look for something else? She's pregnant at the time, and I'm going, I have no idea. And she said, give it 6 more months. And then in that next 6 months, we picked up 4 new clients, and it was just, it clicked. And then since then, it's been something after the other, and in a great position now where we've been really selective on who we're kind of working with. And it's gotten to a really good point. We're wanting to help everybody, but also wanting to make sure you're doing it right. But it all comes from that mentality of sometimes you got to burn the boats. And if you keep thinking, I could just leave, you're never going to be able to be where you're at. But that is a scary, scary thing for a lot of people. And I would be lying to you if I said it wasn't scary for us. But it was at a point, had the money going, burn the boats. There's no looking back. And I like I said, I thank God we did. I mean, now in a great situation with a great team and helping a lot of great clients, that truly blessed. But the problem is everybody sees, and I think there was one of those quotes that I just saw again, that an overnight success takes 10 years. And that's kind of how I feel. Everybody's, oh, you're killing it. You go to Final Four. Oh, you helped this conference with their media deal. You just helped this one. Oh, the Alabama deal, Eastern Michigan. You're going, yeah, that's great. But that all came through a lot of hard work on the backside of getting on planes, going and seeing people, and getting out and just doing it. That you just got to burn the boats.
You say it's scary, and it was scary to burn the boats. But why for you mentally, Dan, is it scarier to live a life where you would have had regrets if you didn't burn the boats?
Let me get sentimental. I saw that from family, growing up. Most of my family worked in prison guards. I mean, that's what they did in our hometown. The fishing industry and belly up, they worked in prison guard. My one cousin tried to go out and start a business, and was like, I'll just settle back. And my father told me when I was 9 that the only way I was going into that prison is if I was in that prison, and created those opportunities that, you'd be failing your family. And I've been, like I said, blessed. My grandmother, she was my world, passed away. It's been 11 years now, but she came to every sporting event, did everything on that side. That it's not just you, it's your family, it's where you come from, and that's something that sticks through. There's a Bronx tale used to say, the worst thing in life is wasted talent. And I think that's an important part, that you've got to get to your talent. That's what getting on talking to my wife and seeing that, I was a guy that threw 70 meters in the javelin, but I'm 6 foot tall, 200 pounds. I'm competing with these guys that look like Greek Adonises. And I got everything I could out of my body. I mean, my shoulder hurts me when I'm doing chin-ups now. My knee's been done. But it was get everything that you could out of yourself and out of your business. That's what, when you lay down on the mat after you're done in life, just knowing, hey, you did everything you could, because it's more than you. It's your family. It's others. And I think that's the part that makes it special. And like I said, I've been blessed. I've had opportunities that other people in my family haven't, other people where I came from haven't, that you can't forget that.
If your grandma could experience with you what you're going through, the success and what you've done with your company, and celebrate that with you, what do you think you'd get out of that right now?
Oh man, like so one thing we do as a family, we do these cards every night when I'm home for dinner. Like I said, I'm on the road 106, so when we're
Sure.
home, we try to have dinner together, and we take cards where they're different colors and they're different topics. And one of those is if you could have a time machine, what would it be? And I said I'd like to take my kids back to meet my grandmother. My grandmother was awesome. Mama, I honestly think she was the one that got me more into sports. Every Sunday after church, we'd go watch the Eagles games at her house. We'd eat spaghetti and cheese, and she would leave church early if or sorry, she'd leave at 12:55 if the pastor was going long. Then he kind of joked and knew that my mom had to be home by the 1 o'clock. I just it's more not about the business; it's about the family. I think it's just I would love for her to be able to meet the kids, see that, and see what who they are, because that's what's more important is yeah, hey, business, all that, can't kids can't explain what they do, but they know that you were there for them. And I think that's what I remember. My grandmother's there for me. She went that national championship trophy. My dad couldn't make it because he was coaching my sister in pole vault in high school, but she was the first person I went up and hugged. Her and my mom were the two people that was close that I saw that flew all the way out to California. We didn't have the money for that, but they flew out to California to be there, and that was pretty awesome. And I think that's the moments and those power of moments. I think that's what I miss, and I wish would have had that opportunity to meet the grandkids. And I said that if I had to do that, I would want to be able to, if I could fast forward in time, see my great grandkids and see that. That's a powerful thing is family. I live by a credo of faith, family, friends, fitness, finances, and fun, in that order. And a lot of times it gets out of whack because hey, my finances may be taking over the fitness and putting a few pounds on. All right, well, we got to get it back into order. But faith and family are the top two that you've got to make sure if they're not set, the rest of the stuff isn't going to work.
It only makes so much sense that faith and family are at the top, because you have your family that's at home with you, but you have created this expansive family and work and all of these people who have faith in you at all of these different colleges. So it's really cool to see how those are 1 and 2 in the pecking order, and how they have made their way known throughout the industry, as well as everything you're doing at home. Dan, Gale, I could do this. We could continue on. We're gonna have to do this again sometime. I'm Bryan Fenley. How fun was this, man? Thank
Right.
you for this
Thank
and
you,
doing
man.
this.
I mean, you got me to tear up, brother. I gotta get you back for that one here in the future. But no, it's been great, man. I appreciate what you're doing in this space as well, letting people tell their stories, because it's not just about the deals; it's about the people, the
Yeah.
families. I didn't realize that when I was in my 20s and hard charger at CBS, and why is this person coming back at 11? O'clock. Okay, they're at their kids' t-ball game. They're doing this, and it's tough because in our world today, where we're constantly connected,
Yeah.
we've got to take time to get that set, and I'm terrible at it. In terms of the phone, putting it away, that you've got to make it a conscious effort, because if not, it'll consume you. And next thing you know, every person tells me the Final Four, and I'm showing pictures of the kids. They're like, next thing you know, I'm getting shown pictures of grandkids from people, and they're like, it's going to happen way too fast.
Yeah.
Right. I said, I appreciate what you're doing and letting people tell their stories. This is awesome.
Well, thank you for being real, for being transparent, and being comfortable to let those emotions out, because I liken this to a safe space where that can happen. And it made it that much more beautiful, this conversation, that you were able to do it. Dan Gale with Leona, president. Thanks again, Dan.